Thank you to our speakers, for our panelists, and it's now time has come to proceed to our next panel. Our next panel will be under the topic of government address panel. It's undeniable that government organizations play an important role in the development of innovation in the business world. Government address panel brings together those at the forefront of the region's government officials to discuss the importance of the contribution of the state to create a relevant ecosystem. And now I would love to introduce our panelists. Tural Keremli from Innovation Agency. Mr. Keremli, good to see you. Today we have the Ambassador of the United States of America in Azerbaijan, Mr. Lee Litzenberger. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for being with us. And we have an extraordinary and plenipotentiary ambassador of Israel to Azerbaijan, Mr. George Dick. Mr. Dick, thank you for being with us again. And in a few minutes, we will have Mr. Bakhtiar Aslanbeyli from BP. But as soon as we have all of our three of our panelists here, I would love to begin with Mr. Keremli, if you don't mind. Mr. Keremli, in one of your reports, you mentioned 3T decades. What you can tell about a 30-year transformation?
So, dear colleagues, it's my pleasure to meet you here and today be part of such a kind of event. Thank you for joining, because it's a very important event at the end of this year. So, related to your question, actually, we have gone through three stages of development through the last century, which we call 3T. First T was decade of the tanks, when, let's say, in early 19th, we had the tanks in our streets, we had the war in Karabakh. And the second T was the decade of the tankers, the period when we started to export our natural resources, oil and gas, and which still contributes the main portion of our national economy. And nowadays, we stepped into the third decade, which we call the technology decade, the third T. I think all the countries around the world understand that the technology is the driving force behind the successful development of the economy, and Azerbaijan is no exception. Even if technology, startups, innovation are relatively new trends for us, we already have made major steps in development of these fields. Moreover, we are up to become a regional hub for innovation, where innovators, entrepreneurs can come together for a reason. Azerbaijan became the main country of the regional internet transit hub and started exporting it to neighboring countries. We established a modern regional data center which meets the Tier 3 standards. Also, today Azerbaijan has 3 satellites in space, exports internet, as I mentioned earlier, to neighbors. So we are transforming into the digital economy. We started the wide implementation of the blockchain. Moreover, we provide the unique opportunity, significantly cut the cost by tax incentives and the pre-access for CIS countries. So today, the country of the people who drilled the first oil well, invented the first oil tanker, first oil pipeline, and the nation of the engineers and the inventors like Lutfizadeh. So now we invest our energy revenues in human capital development. So it's all about my 3T concept.
Thank you very much. Before we continue with the next question, I would love to take a moment and announce that Bakhtiar Aslanbeyli is also with us now. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for spending your time with our summit, with our event. We will hear you soon, of course.
Just being late. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Keremli, you also mentioned that Azerbaijan can become a Silicon Valley, the new Silicon Valley of post-Soviet states. What steps does the Innovation Agency take to implement it, or how do international corporations react to that?
Actually, just a few months ago, we signed the agreement with the Turkish Boğaziçi Venture Fund, and they established the branch, their regional branch office in our agency. So idea is to bring more such progressive venture funds to Azerbaijan. And it's not the only element of becoming the regional hub. We are also very eager to promote the more liberal legislation, because once we have more incentives for the startups, for the inventors, for the small and medium enterprises, more we will attract investment, and the more startups from regional countries will apply and to our agency and will migrate to our ecosystem. It's not easy because today we have competition. All regional countries are trying to be the regional hub, but I'm more than sure Azerbaijan has more chances.
Mhm. Thank you very much, Mr. Karimli. Of course, we will continue the topic of Silicon Valley a few minutes later with Mr. Ambassador Litzenberger, but now I would love to take a moment, and the time has come for Mr. Aslanbeyli. First of all, we would love to express our gratitude to BP. Thank you for supporting us for the next time. Thank you for being with us all the time. It means a lot for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leyla Khan. It's always a pleasure to be part of this this type of the great events, especially in these difficult times. And obviously, it's great to see that the Innovation Week becomes a good tradition in our country.
Thank you very much. Mr. Aslanbeyli, BP announced that the company would transit to integrated energy company from the international oil company earlier this year. We see that BP is going to take the full advantage of the latest technology in BP's 2030s plans. Please tell us about BP's 2030s visions.
Thank you, Leyla Khan. First of all, I would like to greet my distinguished panel members, Mr. Ambassadors, Mr. Karimli. It's great to see that everyone in good health, in a good mood. Back to the question about the BP's net zero ambition and in general BP's strategy about 2030. In February, we announced our new purpose, net zero ambition and aims, and our determination to reimagine energy and reinvent BP. We then announced our new strategy that sets out how BP expects to deliver net zero ambition. Our new purpose and aims are focused on reimagining energy for people and our planet. And our new ambition is to achieve net zero by 2050 or sooner, and help the world to get there too. And to achieve this, we said that we would have the reinvent BP, reorganize the organization into a faster moving and lower carbon company. It will basically, our new strategy is for a decade of delivery towards our net zero ambition. It will pivot BP from what we are now, from an international oil company, primarily focused on the producing resources, to an integrated energy company that will be delivering solutions for our customers. So to achieve this, we set up quite ambitious KPIs. So just a couple of minutes, if I may, to talk about those KPIs, basically what we achieved to meet those changing demands and to become a more diversified energy company. By 2030, we would like to make a 20-fold increase in development of the new renewable generating capacity to 50 gigawatt, and a 10-fold increase in low carbon energy investment to around $5 billion per year, doubling consumer interactions to 20 million a day, lowering over time oil and gas production at least 1 million barrel of oil equivalent a day, or 40%, and obviously focusing oil and gas exploration on our high-performing existing balance and not entering any new countries for exploration purposes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Aslanbeyli, BP has always stood out among the foreign companies for its CSR projects, for its support of social, scientific, and technological projects. Which sectors will BP prioritize in such projects of the next year, 2021?
Sure, obviously, in addition to our capacity of being operator in Azerbaijan, of the major oil and gas fields in Azerbaijan, which we trusted by the government here, we also would like to join the social life of the country as a company who's actually operating in Azerbaijan for more than 26 years now, and the company who is actually intending to operate in country for another 30 years until the end of the existing production sharing agreements. We feel ourselves as a part of this society and would like to act and behave as a responsible corporate citizen of this society. Having said that, in addition to our oil and gas projects, we're always keen to implement and develop a social investment strategy in a way that will respond to the society's main demands and society's main needs. So our current social investment strategy, which we will continue implementing next year as well, the cornerstone of our strategy is education. So we'll invest heavily into the education to bring international knowledge, to bring innovative knowledge, to bring digital solutions into our system, and to make sure that we support government's education efforts, we support government's innovation efforts by our social investment projects. Obviously, the second direction, and that there is no kind of the chronological order here, the environmental direction. So we will continue investing into the environmental projects. And by saying environmental projects, we mean not only just the building or not just the tree planting or not just a specific environmental project, but also quite bring also the good standards, good international recognized standards into our country, including certain education, certain trainings, just to build up necessary knowledge and skills for the environmental direction. And third direction, obviously, this is the enterprise development, just to help to build up capability and capacity among small, medium enterprises at a certain public institutions, just to make sure that we also support that very important effort in the country, which we're actually aiming to contribute to the development of the non-oil and gas industry in the country. So those are the three major directions. If I try to continue to trailblaze kind of the rhetorics, it's our 3E in our case for the social investment: education, environment, and enterprise development. So
3E you mentioned, right? 3E?
Absolutely. Yes, so 3E: education, environment, and enterprise development.
Good luck to you with the strategy. And last question for this moment. Many global oil companies in the world either invest or buy startups in their field as a result of their cooperation activities with some global funds. Does BP have any experience in this area? Or if not, do you plan to establish a fund for startups in the future?
So we already have a business division called BP Ventures, which was set up more than 10 years ago. Its purpose is to identify and invest in private, high-growth, game-changing technology companies accelerating innovation across the entire energy spectrum. Since its launch, I think BP Ventures has invested about $500 million in technology companies, partners with about 40 startups, and it's working with 200 co-investors and has led 9 exits from its portfolio. So it's quite an active part of the business. We also have a team called Launchpad in BP, which was set up back in 2018 with a mission to help scale businesses that deliver cleaner, more affordable, more reliable energy to the world. And the Launchpad is a term, is a team of business builders with deep capabilities in tech, talent, and growth marketing. And Launchpad also operates like a private equity. Feels like a startup, but it's deeply connected to BP, focusing on accessing the unique advantages that not only a global energy company can bring.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your answers. We will continue with Mr. Ambassadors. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for your patience and for your time. If you don't mind, we will continue with Mr. Litzenberger. Mr. Ambassador, you are the ambassador of the state that has a global startup hub like Silicon Valley. Many startups in the world today still come from America, and many people make their way to Silicon Valley to realize their ideas. What do you think is the main reason for this success?
Thank you very much for that question. I want to wish a good afternoon to everyone. It's a delight to join you all today for Azerbaijan's 3rd annual Innovation Week, and I'm delighted to participate in this panel. I think it's fitting that we're all here today virtually using innovative technology to celebrate innovation, harnessing an idea that turned into reality so that all of us can meet from the safety of our homes and workplaces. So I can only begin to imagine the immense potential of innovative technology in this world. But on the topic of US startups, innovation has long been a part of the United States' history and our culture. One of our most renowned inventors, Thomas Edison, famously said that the value of an idea lies in the using of it. Mm-hmm. So turning an idea into a reality. That's what innovation is all about. And today, my ability to speak with you all virtually is just one example of how we have been able to harness innovation to improve our everyday lives. In the United States, intellectual property now accounts for over 1/3 of our gross domestic product. In other words, $6.6 trillion of our GDP comes from innovation, much of it in the technology sector. Protecting the innovations, creations, and inventions that power a nation is vital to promoting economic prosperity and national security. And one of the reasons that startup hubs have expanded so quickly in the US is because we understand that building an innovation economy is all about creating a foundation of trust. This is trust, a trust that must be shared between the government and its people. The drivers of the innovation economy is not the government. It's the individual citizens in the private sector, and they must be able to trust that their ideas, their innovations, and their intellectual property will be respected and protected, and that they will be able to reap the economic benefits of their innovative creations like software programs. Now that is true. This foundation of trust is essential not only in the United States, but in every country around the world that wants to develop a digital economy and wants to support innovation. So in that regard, the United States looks forward to continuing our close partnership with Azerbaijan to ensure that intellectual property rights are protected for the benefit of all. I've made this a priority since my arrival here in Azerbaijan, and I'm pleased to say that significant progress has been made, but it has never been more important to continue this effort as Azerbaijan moves into the digital economy.
Thank you very much. But speaking about cooperation, and as you mentioned before, there has been a significant increase in the number of startups in Azerbaijan, especially in these recent years. And there is a big amount of people who are turning into IT. And every year there are various big events. And how do you assess the potential future cooperation between the startup and innovation ecosystem of Azerbaijan and America companies and ecosystems? And you mentioned that you have some priorities in this field. Which plans do you have being an ambassador?
Well, thank you again. I have been incredibly impressed with the amazing potential here in Azerbaijan for developing and supporting innovative technologies. I think you have significant potential here. And I think both the United States and Azerbaijan understand that building innovation ecosystems helps all the parties involved, filling in skills and gaps and knowledge gaps among collaborators. Here in Azerbaijan, some of the United States' most innovative companies are already actively involved in encouraging innovative thinking, training the next generation in tech processes, and accelerating Azerbaijan's countrywide digital transformation. In July of this year, I was delighted to see Silicon Valley's Draper University rank Azerbaijani startups ABC Planet and Vrendly among the most promising startup endeavors of the year. That's a significant accomplishment for a small country like Azerbaijan. Now, the United States is home to many innovation hubs, all of which recognize the importance of international partnerships to promote innovation. And as an embassy, we look forward to continuing to promote people-to-people exchanges, including on the subject of innovation, in the coming year. And that's one way we can help build those bridges and support innovation. Look, this is really important. we see that partnerships accelerate innovation. They facilitate new exchanges of ideas, and they provide access to resources that innovators might not have had on their own. We understand that this often requires looking beyond one's borders for help, collaboration, and investment, and we and American companies are open to doing that. And while we look to expand our partnerships, it's imperative that we partner only with those that we can trust to act responsibly and in line with transparent and democratic values. Over the last year, the United States and a growing coalition of partners have taken action to address what we see as a serious security and privacy risks connected to partnering with untrusted Chinese vendors, like Huawei in particular. Under Chinese law, Chinese companies and researchers are required to share technology with the Chinese military and the surveillance state. This is not good for startups and software innovators, and it's not good for the privacy of their users. That's why the United States and a growing number of countries across the world have taken action over the last year to prevent the illegal transfer of technology to the People's Republic of China, and instead to build a digital future anchored in the principle of trust. One of these actions was the establishment of the Clean Network Initiative, which now includes 53 countries and more than 180 telecommunications companies, all committed to developing our world's 5G future securely without the use of untrusted vendors. I think Azerbaijan wants and should be part of that community. We hope that you will soon join this growing network and help build and develop innovation in a safe, secure manner. My hope is that by next year's Inno Week, we can accelerate partnerships between Azerbaijan and the United States to create a lasting innovation ecosystem among our two countries. I also hope that we can work together to promote digital development along this clean path that I mentioned, thereby protecting citizens' privacy, businesses' intellectual property, and ultimately, Azerbaijan's national security too. It was a pleasure joining you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you for your time. And now we have one more honorable speaker who is waiting from the very beginning. Thank you, Mr. Geek, for being so patient and for listening to our panelists. Mr. Ambassador, today Israel is one of the leading countries in the field of high technology exports to the world. As far as I know, the people of Israel are called startup nations. And today, the economy that invents and produces something is very important, especially in the field of high technology. But the most important thing is to export. Why do you think is Israel's success in exporting high technology? What's the main reason?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, and thank you for having me on this esteemed panel. As you know, patience is not a very Israeli attribute, but having such interesting speakers had definitely helped learning something, and I've learned a lot from my esteemed partners to this panel. So as to your question, first of all, the world is changing. The world has already changed. We live in revolutionary times. Here is how. If you look at the list of the leading 10 companies of the world, in 2006, the list includes 5 energy companies and 1 IT company, Microsoft. Now, this list was more or less without the IT company the same for almost the last 30, 40 years. But 10 years later, in 2016, a blink of an eye in historic terms, it's completely reversed. Only 1 energy company left and 5 IT companies, a dramatic change in such a short time. And you know these companies, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. What do all these companies have in common? Well, they are all built on innovation. And also they all have major research centers in Israel. Of course, they're mostly American. Mm-hmm. So why do they open research centers in Israel? Because Israel is a world leader in innovation, and the future belongs to those who innovate. Now, your question, how was it done? How did Israel become the startup nation, as you have defined it, become an engine of innovation? I personally can think of 5 reasons for the success story. First, a curse that has been turned into a blessing, our defense needs. You know, we live in a neighborhood where we must have robust defense. So what we do is we take the best and the brightest of our young people in the military, and we give them access to basically endless resources. Then we give them a problem and ask them to think of a solution and then implement the solution. So they think, they experiment, they fail, and eventually they invent things that were once imagined only in fantasy. The result is that Israel has the highest number of engineers per capita in the world. It also creates a human resource that is flexible and adaptable to change, and that is the fuel of innovation. So this is reason number one. The second is research. We have excellent research institutions and universities. You know some of them, of course, like the Technion, the Weizmann Institute, and others. Israel spends 5% of its GDP on research and development, R&D. That's more than any other country in the world. And the result is that our scientific institutions produce an inordinary share of Nobel Prize winners for Israel. We're talking about 8 of them, including 6 in chemistry. So this is number 2, top quality scientific institutions. Third, I think there is a special spirit and culture in Israel. Historically, you know, the Jewish people have always treasured education and knowledge. When the world was still illiterate, every Jewish father taught his children to read the Bible. And when the walls of the ghetto broke down, an abundance of disciplines opened up to them, from physics to mathematics to chemistry to space, etc. And more importantly, it is, generally speaking, in our culture, the idea that making mistakes isn't a source of shame, but rather a driving force to try again and do better. Last week, I tried to fix a lamp in the house and I failed. So I told my wife, maybe this is God's way of telling us that we should sit in the dark tonight. And her response was a very Israeli one. Maybe God just wants you to try harder. So from the Talmud to Einstein, the Jewish people were always asking questions. Truth was never finite, and failure was always nothing more than a good reason to try again. Fourth reason is that Israel is a very small country. Azerbaijan is around 87,000 square kilometers, I believe. Israel is around 20, less than a quarter. So everything is close by and everyone is close to everyone else. And everybody competes with everyone, but at the same time, everyone collaborates with each other. So technology that is used for missiles can be put in a camera that is used inside a pill that goes into your digestive system, because the guy from the military has a friend who is now in the medical field. Nanotechnology is suddenly used in space technologies and so on. And the fifth and last reason is that when facing a hopeless reality, we never gave up hope. To survive, we had to innovate. We didn't have abundant natural resources. We were outnumbered and facing constant threats. Our neighbors even imposed upon us an economic boycott. So we had to innovate to survive. And you see the results. The birth of modern Israel, remember, is an innovation in itself. The rebirth of even the Hebrew language is an innovation. The rebirth of agriculture in our land is an innovation. Making a tiny country that is over 60% desert into a world exporter of water and water technologies is an innovation. In fact, the innovation industry in itself in Israel is an innovation. We innovate to survive and to prosper, because we believe the future belongs to those who innovate. And I believe this is the key to making Israel the innovation nation, or the startup nation, as you have put it.
Thank you very much. And if I ask, are you going to share your big practice? I mean, if you want to support some startups from Azerbaijan, because we have so many startups in Azerbaijan that get investments from different parts of the world or export their products. What should an Azerbaijani startup do to penetrate the Israeli market or to get investment? Are there any special programs for that? If it's possible, I would love to ask you to share your advice.
So this is maybe the field that is complementing the innovation industry in Israel, the venture capital, the funding industry. In Israel, there are around 70 active venture capital funds, 14 of which are international VCs with offices in Israel. And I can tell you that from 2010 to 2019, Israeli tech companies raised a total of almost $40 billion US. And since 2010, the capital raised by Israeli tech companies have grown by 400%, and the number of deals made by 64%. And in 2019 alone, last year, Israeli startups raised the record of $8.3 billion from investors, and 20 of these deals were mega deals, where the investment was over $100 million. So how can, to your question, how can Azerbaijani startups, Azerbaijani companies be part of that cake of the VC and to partner with Israeli VCs and funds? First of all, I'll speak in general terms and then specific programs. First of all, you have to be relevant. You have to realize what are the fields that are interesting for Israeli VCs and to adapt yourself to that. And I can tell you that looking at last year, 2019, AI companies, artificial intelligence, raised 3.7 billion out of the 9.1. That's almost 200 deals. Cybersecurity raised 1.8 billion. FinTech, 1.7 billion, which is up from 800 million a year before, so more than double in 1 year. And life sciences, biology, chemistry, and the medical field raised the 1.37 billion, which is also up from the years before. So I would say that first you have to be interesting to the Israeli VCs by looking into those fields that are interesting to them that they look into. Second, so first thing is be relevant. Secondly is be visible. You have to come to Israel. There are programs in Israel, the DLD Tel Aviv, the Innovation Week, etc., that you have to come and you have to meet people. You have to make friends. You have to show what you have. People need to know about you. You need to know about who's doing what in Israel. And it's a small country. You can meet people. It's a tiny place at the end of the day. As the embassy is offering, we will always help people to find the right partners in Israel in that sense. That's maybe the third point. You have to be proactive. The embassy is working closely with, for example, the innovation agency headed by Mr. Karimli, who's today with us, in order to connect those startups to their Israeli partners. There are platforms already existing in Israel from how you call it, hackathons, for example, etc., where companies can come and do an exercise that someone is asking for, and if the solution they provide works, they can get access to funds or partnerships. And of course, it's always good to have an Israeli partner to work with who can also open the doors on the other side. But I can also tell you that the state of Israel and Azerbaijan are working on a bilateral agreement on innovation. It has not been signed yet. It's in the progress, but once it will be completed, hopefully that will also provide a platform for Azerbaijani companies to cooperate with Israelis, whether venture capitals or others.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. You just invited everybody to Israel. I mean, startuppers, businessmen, but within the COVID quarantine regime, we can go out from our houses only for 3 hours. Maybe if we have some alternative options for this period.
First of all, I commend what Ambassador Litzenberger said before. I think we have marvelous technologies that allow us to meet and to convene even digitally these days. Many of these conferences are taking form online, but soon maybe Israel will become a green country. We are starting Saturday to give vaccinations to people. We're going to be one of the first countries, maybe the first, to have fully vaccinated its population by summer. Hopefully it will be easier to come to Israel and to convene. And we can also, when that happens, maybe Israelis can come to Azerbaijan more easily. And I know that COVID times are difficult for everyone, but the invitation, I assure you, will still stand after COVID. And of course, we will, if there's any specific request, we will try to connect already now online, whoever needs to connect to his Israeli counterparts.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. If you have something to add or some comments or some offers, we will be happy to hear. Our dear panelists, Mr. Ambassadors, Mr. Karimli, Mr. Aslan Beyli. So if it's all done. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being with us. Take care, and I wish you good health and happiness.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.